I stepped into Ethan Sullivan's office that humid Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day in Austin where the air sticks to your skin and the skyline shimmers through the heat haze. The room smelled of polished oak and ambition, his desk a fortress of dark wood, flanked by floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city like a prize he'd already claimed. The carpet muffled my footsteps, but not the thudding in my chest. I'd been summoned, and in a company like Horizon Innovations, a summons from the CEO rarely meant good news. Ethan sat there, leaned back in his leather chair, tie loosened just enough to signal he was in control, but not untouchable. His silver hair caught the light, a crown he'd earned or stolen, depending on who you asked. He didn't look up from the stack of papers he was flipping through, not at first. That was his game. Make you wait, let the silence stretch until you felt small. I stood there, hands clasped behind my back, staring at the framed photo on his wall, him shaking hands with Henry Sullivan, my old mentor, back when this company still had a soul. "Emily," he finally said, his voice smooth as bourbon but sharp underneath. "Take a seat." He gestured to the chair across from him, a low-slung thing that forced you to look up at him. I sat, spine straight, refusing to sink into it. My navy blazer felt too tight, my heels too loud when I'd crossed the threshold. I'd spent 8 years climbing the ranks here, turning Horizon's marketing into something fierce, something Henry would have been proud of. And now Ethan was watching me like a hawk sizing up its next meal. "I'll cut to it," he said, tossing the papers down with a soft thud. "We're restructuring. The board's been on my ass about efficiency, and marketing's taking a hit. Your role, director of marketing, it's being cut." The words landed like a punch I'd seen coming but still couldn't dodge. My mouth went dry, but I didn't flinch. Not yet. I'd learned long ago to keep my face steady, even when the ground shifted beneath me. "Cut," I repeated, tasting the word. "After the numbers I delivered last quarter? 30% growth, Ethan. That's not exactly dead weight." He smirked, just a flicker, but it was there. "Numbers don't lie, but they don't vote either. The board wants leaner operations. It's not personal, Emily. You've done good work. Hell, great work. But this is about survival." Survival. Funny word coming from him. Ethan Sullivan didn't survive, he conquered. He'd taken Henry's company, twisted it into something sleek and soulless, all while smiling for the cameras. Henry had hired me fresh out of college, seen something in me. A spark, he'd called it. He'd taught me how to wield ambition like a blade, how to fight for what mattered. And then Ethan, his own nephew, had shoved him out 3 years ago, claiming retirement, while Henry's health crumbled. I'd stayed, thinking I could preserve what Henry built. Now I wondered if that was naive. "So, what's the play?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "You're not just kicking me to the curb. That's not your style." He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, fingers steepled. "Smart girl. No, I need you to stick around a little longer. Train your replacement. Lauren Baxter's coming in tomorrow. Sharp kid, fresh from some startup in Dallas. You'll show her the ropes, get her up to speed. 2 weeks, tops. Then you're out." Lauren Baxter. The name stung, a splinter under my skin. Some hotshot half my age, probably all polish and no grit, waltzing into the job I'd bled for. I wanted to snap back, to tell him where he could shove his restructure. But something stopped me, a flicker of calm, cool and deep, rising from a place I hadn't tapped in months. I pressed my lips into a thin line, hiding the triumph I felt bubbling up. Ethan didn't know. He couldn't. Not yet. 2 weeks, I said, nodding slowly. "And then what?" "A handshake and a severance check." "Better than that," he replied, leaning back again. 6 months' pay, full benefits through the end. You'll land on your feet. Always do." I almost laughed. 6 months' pay. Generous for anyone else, but a pittance compared to what I'd already set in motion. I thought of Henry, the way he'd sit me down in this very office, back when it was his, and talk about legacy, about building something that outlasted you. Ethan had betrayed that, turned Horizon into a machine for his own ego. And now he thought he'd outmaneuvered me too. "Fine," I said, standing up, smoothing my blazer. "I'll train her. Tomorrow, then." Tomorrow, he confirmed, already turning back to his papers, dismissing me without another glance. I walked out, heels clicking sharper now, each step a drumbeat in my head. The glass walls of the executive floor reflected my silhouette, a woman in control, even if Ethan couldn't see it. He thought he'd won, thought he'd stripped me bare. But he didn't know about EKH Ventures. He didn't know about the papers I'd signed 3 months ago, the quiet moves I'd made in the shadows. Horizon Innovations wasn't his anymore, it was mine. And soon, he'd feel the weight of that truth. The elevator doors slid shut behind me, and I let out a slow breath, the bittersweet tang of Henry's memory mixing with the fire in my gut. Ethan's betrayal had lit the match, but Henry's faith had forged the steel. 2 weeks. I'd play his game for 2 weeks. Then I'd burn his world down. The next morning, I walked into my office at Horizon Innovations with a cup of black coffee in hand, the bitter steam curling up like a warning I refused to heed. The space felt different now, not the sanctuary it had been for 8 years, but a battlefield I'd been ordered to surrender. My desk sat in the corner, a sleek slab of glass littered with files and a framed photo of Henry and me from the early days, both of us grinning at some long-forgotten launch party. The walls were lined with awards, campaign posters, proof of the empire I'd built brick by bloody brick. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, slicing the room into sharp angles, and I caught my reflection in the glass, calm, steady, a mask I'd perfected long ago. I set the coffee down and sank into my chair, the leather creaking under me. Ethan's words from yesterday still echoed in my skull. Asterisk your roles being cut. Train your replacement. Asterisk 2 weeks. That's all he'd given me to pack up a career I'd poured my soul into. My fingers brushed the edge of a folder, last quarter's numbers, the ones I'd thrown in his face. 30% growth. He didn't care. The board didn't care. And now Lauren Baxter, some Dallas startup darling, was waltzing in to claim it all. The clock on my desk ticked past 9, and I heard her before I saw her. Heels clicking down the hall, purposeful but too eager, like a kid playing dress-up in her mom's shoes. The door swung open, and there she was, Lauren Baxter, mid-20s, blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, eyes bright with that shiny new car smell of ambition. She wore a crisp white blouse and a pencil skirt, clutching a tablet like it was a shield. I stood, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Emily Harper," I said, extending a hand. "Welcome to Horizon." "Lauren Baxter," she replied, her grip firm, her voice a little too chipper. "I've heard so much about you. Your campaigns, they're legendary around here." Legendary. The word stung, a backhanded compliment wrapped in bubblegum enthusiasm. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, and she sat, crossing her legs, tablet balanced on her knee. Up close, she looked younger than I'd expected, barely out of grad school, probably. Her nails were manicured, her posture perfect. Everything about her screamed polish, but I wondered how much steel lay underneath. "Thanks," I said, settling back into my chair. "Let's hope you can keep the legend alive." She laughed, a quick, nervous sound, and I let the silence hang for a beat, watching her shift slightly. I wasn't here to make her comfortable. Not yet. Ethan wanted me to train her. Fine. I'd train her. But I'd do it my way, on my terms, while the clock ticked down to the moment I'd flip the table on him. So, I started leaning forward. "What's your background?" "Ethan said you're from some startup in Dallas." "Tell me about it." Her eyes lit up and she launched into it. Digital marketing, a tech firm that pivoted to e-commerce, a string of buzzwords I'd heard 1,000 times. She was good, I'd give her that. Quick, articulate, the kind of person who'd charm a room without breaking a sweat. But, as she talked, my mind drifted. I saw Henry in her place, years ago, sitting across from me in this same office, his gravelly voice laying out his vision for Horizon. He believed in me when I was just a scrappy kid with big ideas. And Ethan, he'd taken that trust and torched it. "Emily." Lauren's voice snapped me back. She was staring at me, head tilted. "You okay?" I blinked, realizing I'd let my mask slip. "Yeah," I said, clearing my throat. Just thinking about how fast things move around here. Let's get started. I'll walk you through the current campaign, Q4 projections, target demographics, the works. She nodded, tapping at her tablet, and I pulled up the files on my screen. For the next hour, I talked her through it. Numbers, strategies, the blood and sweat of my team distilled into charts and bullet points. She asked smart questions, took notes, kept up. Part of me hated how competent she was. Another part, a quieter, colder part, didn't care. She was a pawn in Ethan's game, just like I'd been. But unlike her, I wasn't staying on the board. Around 10:30, my phone buzzed. A text from Nathan Carter, my lawyer and one of the few people I trusted. Asterisk, paperwork's ready. EKH Ventures is locked in. Board meeting tomorrow. Asterisk, I glanced at it, keeping my face neutral, and slid the phone face down. Tomorrow. That's when I'd call the emergency meeting, when I'd lay my cards on the table. Ethan thought he'd gutted me, but he didn't know I'd been buying Horizon out from under him for months, piece by silent piece. Everything okay? Lauren asked again, her brow furrowing. Fine, I said, sharper than I meant to. I softened it with a half smile. Just the usual chaos. You'll get used to it. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. Good. Let her wonder. I turned back to the screen, pointing at a graph. This is where we pivoted last year, focused on mid-tier markets instead of chasing the big dogs. Paid off big. You'll need to protect that shift. Got it, she said, scribbling something. Ethan mentioned the restructures about streamlining. Any tips on navigating that? I froze for a split second, then laughed. A dry, brittle sound. Ethan's full of advice, isn't he? Here's mine. Watch your back. This place eats people who don't. Her pen paused, and she looked up, eyes wide. I held her gaze, letting the weight settle. She didn't know the half of it, not about Ethan's knife, not about the blade I was sharpening in return. I felt the fire in my chest flare, a mix of rage and resolve, tempered by the memory of Henry's quiet pride. Ethan had betrayed us both, but I'd make it right. Not for justice, not anymore. For revenge. Anyway, I said, breaking the tension, let's move on. You'll need to meet the team tomorrow. They're rattled by the changes, but they're solid. She nodded, and we kept going, me playing the dutiful mentor, her soaking it up like a sponge. Every word I said was true, every lesson real. But beneath it, my mind churned. The board meeting loomed, a storm gathering on the horizon. I pictured Ethan's face when I'd walk in, papers in hand, and tell him Horizon was mine. The calm I'd felt yesterday hardened into something lethal, a quiet triumph I buried deep. Lauren didn't see it. Ethan wouldn't either, not until it was too late. By noon, my coffee was cold, and Lauren's tablet was full. I leaned back, watching her pack up, and felt the first real twist of the day settle in my gut. This wasn't just about losing my job anymore. It was about taking back what was mine, what Henry had built, what Ethan had stolen. 2 weeks, he'd said. I wouldn't need 2 days. See you tomorrow, Lauren said, standing, her smile back in place. Tomorrow, I echoed, nodding. She left, heels clicking out of earshot, and I turned to the window, the city sprawling below me. Somewhere out there, Ethan was plotting his next move, thinking he'd already won. I almost pitied him. Almost. The afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across my office at Horizon Innovations. I stood by the window, staring out at the Austin skyline, the glass towers glinting like they were mocking me. My hands rested on the sill, fingers digging into the cool metal, grounding me as my mind raced. Lauren had left an hour ago, her eager footsteps fading down the hall, leaving me alone with the weight of what came next. The air felt thick, heavy with the scent of printer ink and the faint musk of old leather from my chair. This office, my office, had been a war room for years, a place where I'd fought battles and won. Now it was a cage, and Ethan held the key. I turned back to my desk, the glass surface reflecting the dimming light. Nathan's text still glowed in my mind. Asterisk, paperwork's ready. Board meeting tomorrow. Asterisk, my pulse quickened, a steady drumbeat beneath my ribs. 3 months ago, I'd started buying Horizon through EKH Ventures, quietly, meticulously, using every dime I'd saved and every favor I could call in. Ethan didn't suspect a thing. He thought he'd broken me with his restructure, thought I'd slink away with a severance check and a bruised ego. But tomorrow, I'd walk into that boardroom and take it all back. The thought should have thrilled me, but it didn't. Not entirely. There was a hollow ache beneath it, a bittersweet pang I couldn't shake. Henry's face flashed in my memory, his craggy smile, and the way he'd clap me on the shoulder after a late night hashing out plans. "You've got steel in you, Emily," he'd said once, his voice rough with pride. He'd built Horizon on grit and vision, not the sleek, cutthroat machine Ethan had turned it into. I'd stayed after Henry was forced out, telling myself I could protect his legacy. Now, staring at the photo of us on my desk, I wondered if I'd failed him until this moment. A knock at the door jolted me. I straightened, smoothing my blazer, and called, "Come in." Nathan Carter stepped inside, all sharp suit and sharper eyes. He was a lean man, mid-40s, with a jawline that could cut glass and a mind that could dismantle a contract in minutes. My lawyer, my confidant, the one who'd made EKH Ventures a reality. He carried a slim leather folder under his arm, and his lips twitched into a half-smile as he shut the door behind him. "Thought I'd drop by," he said, crossing the room in 3 easy strides. "You didn't answer my text." "Been busy," I replied, nodding toward the chair Lauren had vacated. "Training the next big thing, apparently." He sat, setting the folder on my desk with a soft tap. "Lauren Baxter, right? Ethan's new golden girl. How's that going?" I snorted, leaning against the edge of the desk. "She's green, but she's quick. Doesn't matter. She's not the real fight." Nathan's smile faded, replaced by that steely focus I'd come to rely on. "No, she's not. Ethan is. You ready for tomorrow?" Was I? I crossed my arms, feeling the weight of the question settle in my chest. I'd spent months plotting this, nights poring over financials, days playing the loyal soldier while I bought up shares behind Ethan's back. The board was a mix of old guards loyal to Henry and new blood Ethan had charmed, but the numbers didn't lie. EKH Ventures owned Horizon now. I owned it. All I had to do was walk in there, drop the bombshell, and watch Ethan's world crumble. "I'm ready," I said, voice steady. "But it's not just about winning, Nathan. It's about what comes after." He tilted his head, studying me. "You're thinking about Henry." "Always," I admitted, glancing at the photo again. "He'd hate what Ethan's done to this place. The layoffs, the efficiency bullshit. I'm taking it back for him, but," I trailed off, the ache swelling. "It's not pure, you know? There's revenge in it too. A lot of it." Nathan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You think Henry judged you for that? After what Ethan pulled? Guy stabbed his own uncle in the back, Emily. You're not the villain here." "Maybe not," I said, but the words felt hollow. I wanted Ethan gone. Wanted him to feel the same gut punch he'd dealt me yesterday. But the deeper I waded into this, the murkier it got. Justice for Henry. Revenge for me. The lines blurred, and I wasn't sure where one ended and the other began. Nathan tapped the folder. "This is the final paperwork. Signed, sealed, delivered. You call the emergency meeting, present this, and it's done. Ethan's out. You're in." I reached for it, flipping it open. The pages stared back at me. Black ink on white, a map of my triumph. My fingers traced the EKH Ventures logo, a quiet thrill sparking alongside the unease. "He won't see it coming," I murmured, more to myself than Nathan. "No, he won't," he said, standing. "Boardroom's booked for 10 tomorrow. I'll be there. You just need to bring the fire." I nodded, closing the folder. "I've got plenty of that." He headed for the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "Get some sleep, Emily. You've earned it." "Sleep's overrated," I shot back, managing a faint smile. He chuckled and left, the door clicking shut behind him. Alone again, I sank into my chair, the folder heavy in my lap. The office was silent now, the hum of the building fading as the day wound down. I pictured the boardroom tomorrow, the long mahogany table, the leather chairs, Ethan at the head like a king on his throne. I'd walk in, calm as steel, and rip it all out from under him. The triumph was there, simmering, but so was the tension, coiling tighter with every breath. This wasn't just a takeover. It was a reckoning. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, Henry's voice echoing in my head. "Stealing you, Emily." I hoped he was right. Because tomorrow, I'd need every ounce of it. The clock on my office wall ticked past midnight, its hands slicing through the quiet like a blade through my thoughts. I'd stayed late, too wired to leave after Nathan's visit, the leather folder still sitting on my desk like a loaded gun. The city lights beyond the window pulsed faintly, a heartbeat I could feel in my chest. Horizon Innovations was mine, on paper, at least. Tomorrow, I'd make it real. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking under me, and closed my eyes, letting the weight of it settle. 3 months of secrecy, of playing Ethan's loyal soldier while I carved out his empire from the shadows. It all came down to this. Sleep wouldn't come, not tonight. My mind churned, replaying the steps that had brought me here. 3 months ago, I'd sat across from Nathan in a dimly lit bar on 6th Street, the clink of glasses and murmur of strangers masking our words. I'd told him about EKH Ventures, Emily Catherine Harper, my initials stamped on a shell company I'd built to buy Horizon piece by piece. He'd raised an eyebrow, then grinned, promising to make it airtight. We'd worked fast, cashing in favors, liquidating assets, staying off Ethan's radar. Every share I bought felt like a brick pulled from his castle, and now the walls were ready to fall. I stood, pacing to the window, my reflection a ghost against the glass. The office was silent, but I could still hear Ethan's voice from yesterday. Asterisk your rolls being cut, asterisk, smooth and smug, like he'd already won. I'd wanted to lunge across his desk then, to scream that I'd outplayed him. But I'd held it in, buried it deep, letting it fester into something sharper. Revenge wasn't noble, I knew that. Henry wouldn't have wanted it this way. He'd have called for justice, for rebuilding what Ethan had broken. But Henry wasn't here, and the fire in me wasn't pure anymore. It was personal, raw, and I couldn't shake it. Tomorrow loomed like a storm cloud, heavy with tension I could taste. The board meeting at 10. Ethan at the head of the table, oblivious. Me, walking in with Nathan's folder, laying out the truth. EKH Ventures owned 51% of Horizon Innovations. My company. My rules. I pictured his face, those sharp features crumpling, that silver hair no longer a crown but a relic. The anticipation coiled tight in my gut, a mix of dread and hunger I couldn't untangle. This was the turning point, the moment I'd either rise or crash. I crossed back to my desk, flipping open the folder one more time. The numbers stared back at me, cold and final. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline surging beneath my skin. I'd spent years climbing Horizon's ladder, proving myself to Henry, to the team, to myself. Ethan thought he could snap his fingers and erase that. He was wrong. Tomorrow, I'd show him just how wrong. The next morning came fast, the sky over Austin gray and restless, like it knew what was coming. I stood in my apartment, staring into the mirror as I knotted my tie, a deep red one, bold, a signal I wasn't hiding anymore. My navy suit hugged my frame, sharp and tailored, armor for the fight ahead. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me, eyes hard, jaw set, a stranger forged in the crucible of Ethan's betrayal. I grabbed my briefcase, the folder tucked inside, and headed out, the click of my heels on the hardwood floor echoing like a war drum. Horizon's executive floor buzzed when I arrived, a low hum of tension rippling through the glass-walled offices. I'd called the emergency board meeting at 7 a.m., routing it through Nathan to keep my name off the notice. Ethan would assume it was about the restructure, another chance to flex his control. Let him think that. I nodded to a few staffers as I passed, their greetings clipped, their eyes darting. They knew something was up. Rumors spread fast here, but they didn't know the half of it. The boardroom doors loomed ahead, twin slabs of polished oak that felt heavier than they should have. I paused outside, smoothing my jacket, feeling the weight of Nathan's folder in my hand. My chest tightened, a flicker of doubt creeping in. What if the board fought back? What if Ethan had a card I hadn't seen? I shoved it down hard. No room for that now. I'd come too far. The door swung open, and I stepped inside. The room hit me like a wall, long mahogany table gleaming under recessed lights, leather chairs lining it like sentinels. The air smelled of coffee and power, thick with the weight of decisions that had shaped this company. Ethan sat at the head, flipping through a tablet, his posture relaxed, kingly. The board flanked him, 8 men and women, a mix of grizzled veterans and younger faces Ethan had wooed. Nathan stood near the window, hands in his pockets, giving me a slight nod.
My ally.
My anchor. Emily, Ethan said, glancing up, his tone dripping with faint surprise. Didn't expect you here. This about the restructure? I didn't answer right away. I walked to the table's edge, setting my briefcase down with a deliberate thud, letting the sound hang. Every eye turned to me, curiosity sharpening into something else. I opened the case, pulled out the folder, and slid it across the table toward Ethan. It skidded to a stop in front of him, a quiet challenge. "What's this?" he asked, brow furrowing as he reached for it. "Open it," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the room like a blade. He flipped it open, his eyes scanning the first page. I watched the shift, confusion, then recognition, then a slow bleed of color from his face. His fingers tightened on the paper, crumpling the edge. "EKH Ventures," he muttered, almost to himself. Then louder, sharper. "What the hell is this, Emily?" I stepped closer, hands clasped behind my back, meeting his glare head-on. "That's proof," I said. "Proof that as of 3 months ago, EKH Ventures acquired controlling interest in Horizon Innovations. 51%. My company. My call." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, a chair scraping as someone shifted. Ethan shot to his feet, slamming the folder down. "This is bullshit. You can't just—" "I already did." I cut in, voice low but ironclad. "Check the signatures. Check the filings. It's done, Ethan. You're out." He stared at me, chest heaving, a vein pulsing in his temple. The board stirred, papers rustling as they grabbed copies Nathan had slipped them. Margaret Klein, one of Henry's old allies, spoke first, her voice gravelly but firm. "She's right. The numbers hold. EKH owns the majority." Ethan wheeled on her. "You're buying this?" "She's been scheming behind my back." "Like you schemed behind Henry's?" I snapped, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The room went still, the air crackling. I took a breath, steadying myself. "You forced him out, Ethan. Gutted what he built. I'm taking it back." His eyes narrowed, a predator sizing me up. "You think you can run this place? You're a marketing hack, Emily, not a CEO." "Maybe," I said, stepping closer, my voice dropping to a hiss only he could hear. "But I've got more steel than you ever will." I turned to the board, raising my voice. "You've got the docs. You know the law. I'm calling for a vote. Ethan Sullivan removed as CEO, effective immediately. All in favor." Silence stretched, taut as a wire. Then Margaret's hand went up, followed by Jim Torres, another Henry loyalist. One by one, the others followed, some reluctant, some resolute, until every hand was raised. Ethan stood frozen, his kingdom slipping through his fingers. "Motion carries," Nathan said, stepping forward, his tone clipped. "Ethan, you're done." Ethan's laugh was bitter, jagged. "You'll regret this," he spat, grabbing his tablet and storming toward the door. 2 security guards, called by Nathan I realized, met him there, escorting him out. The doors slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing like a gavel. I exhaled, the tension draining from my shoulders, replaced by a rush of something fierce, satisfaction, relief, a hint of disbelief. The boardroom buzzed, voices overlapping, but I barely heard them. I'd done it. Horizon was mine. Nathan clapped a hand on my shoulder, his grin sharp. "Hell of a show, Harper." I nodded, still staring at the empty chair where Ethan had sat. The triumph was there, bitter and sweet, tangled with Henry's memory and the cost of what I'd become. This wasn't over, not yet. But for now, I'd won. The boardroom doors thudded shut behind Ethan, the echo ricocheting off the walls like the final note of a song I'd been composing for months. I stood there, hands still clasped behind my back, the air buzzing with the board's overlapping voices, some stunned, some calculating, all trying to catch up to the reality I'd just dropped like a live grenade. The long mahogany table gleamed under the lights, its surface now littered with Nathan's copies of the takeover papers, each page a shard of the empire I'd reclaimed. My empire. The thought hit me hard, a jolt of triumph laced with something heavier, something I couldn't name yet. Nathan's hand lingered on my shoulder, his grip firm, grounding. "Hell of a show, Harper," he said again. Quieter this time, his grin softening into something almost proud. I nodded, my eyes still locked on Ethan's empty chair, the throne I toppled him from. The leather looked worn now, less regal, like it had been waiting for this moment as long as I had. Margaret Klein's gravelly voice cut through the noise. "Emily, you've got balls, I'll give you that." She leaned back in her seat, arms crossed, her weathered face creasing into a faint smirk. Henry'd be laughing his ass off right now. The mention of Henry twisted something in my chest, a bittersweet ache I'd been carrying since the day Ethan forced him out. I forced a smile, meeting her gaze. He'd probably say I should have done it sooner. Maybe. Jim Torres chimed in, his baritone steady as he flipped through the papers. "But you did it clean. That's what counts."
Clean.
The word stuck, sharp and ironic. This didn't feel clean, not with the venom I'd spat at Ethan, not with a fire still smoldering in my gut. I'd told myself this was for Henry, for the company he'd built, but standing here, watching the board shuffle and murmur, I couldn't deny the truth. I'd wanted Ethan to hurt. I'd wanted him to feel the same hollow sting he'd dealt me. And now he had. I turned to Nathan, lowering my voice. "Let's wrap this up. I need air." He nodded, stepping forward to take the reins. "All right, folks," he said, clapping his hands once, sharp and commanding. "You've got the docs. Motions carried. Ethan's out, Emily's in. We'll reconvene next week to sort the details." Meeting adjourned. The board stirred, chairs scraping as they gathered their things. A few shot me quick glances, some wary, some impressed, but I didn't linger to read them. I grabbed my briefcase and headed for the door, Nathan falling into step beside me. The executive floor hummed as we stepped out, staffers darting glances our way, whispers trailing us like shadows. News traveled fast here. They'd know soon enough. "My office," I said, not breaking stride. Nathan didn't argue. The walk was short, but every step felt heavier, the adrenaline ebbing into a strange, restless buzz. My office door clicked shut behind us, and I dropped my briefcase on the desk, the glass top rattling faintly. The room was dim, the blinds half drawn, casting slanted shadows across the awards on the walls, relics of a life that felt distant now. I sank into my chair, exhaling hard, and Nathan took the seat across from me, loosening his tie. "You okay?" he asked, eyeing me like he could see the storm brewing under my skin. I rubbed my temples, the tension coiling tight behind my eyes. "I don't know," I admitted, voice quieter than I meant it to be. "It's done. He's gone. But it doesn't feel finished." Nathan leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. "It's not. You got the keys now, Emily, but the hard part's just starting. Running this place, it's not just about kicking Ethan out. It's about what you build next. What I build next." The words hung there, heavy with expectation. I'd spent so long plotting this takeover, every move a chess piece slid into place, that I hadn't stopped to think about the aftermath. Horizon was mine, but it was battered. Ethan's cuts, his restructures, his cold efficiency had left scars. The team was rattled, the culture frayed. I'd won the battle, but the war was bigger than I'd realized. "I need to talk to Rachel," I said, the thought snapping into focus. Rachel Torres, my old deputy, the one who'd stuck by me through Ethan's reign. She'd been out on leave the past month, family emergency, but she'd know how to stitch this place back together. She gets the people. I'll handle the strategy, but she'll rebuild the soul. Nathan raised an eyebrow. You sure she's up for it? She's been out of the loop. She's up for it, I said, firm. She hated Ethan's bullshit, as much as I did. She'll want in. He nodded, pulling out his phone. I'll get her on the line. You want her here today? Yeah, I said, standing, pacing to the window. Sooner the better. We've got momentum, let's use it. The city sprawled below, gray clouds rolling in, the air outside thickening with a promise of rain. I pressed a hand to the glass, cool against my palm, and felt the first real spark of something beyond revenge. Purpose, maybe, or resolve. Ethan was gone, but his shadow lingered in the layoffs, the fear he'd sown. I'd have to root it out piece by piece. Nathan's voice broke my thoughts. Rachel's on her way. ETA 20 minutes. You want me to stick around? No, I said, turning back to him. Go home. You've earned it. I'll handle this. He smirked, standing. Bossy already. I like it. He grabbed his jacket, pausing at the door. Call if you need me. Always, I shot back, and he was gone, the door clicking shut. Alone again, I sank back into my chair, the leather creaking under me. The folder from the boardroom sat on my desk, a trophy I hadn't fully claimed yet. I flipped it open, staring at the EKH Ventures logo, my initials, my mark. 3 months ago, I'd started this in a haze of anger, a quiet vow to make Ethan pay. Now, with him out, the anger was fading, replaced by a tight, thrumming anticipation. This was my shot, not just to undo his damage but to build something better. Something Henry would have recognized. The clock ticked toward 10:30 when my phone buzzed, Rachel texting she was downstairs. I straightened, smoothing my jacket, and headed for the elevator. The ride down was quiet, the hum of the building a faint pulse in my ears. When the doors opened, there she was, Rachel Torres, all fierce energy and dark eyes, her short hair tousled from the wind. She wore a black blazer over jeans, her usual no-nonsense style, and her lips curved into a grin when she saw me. Jesus, Emily, she said, striding over, voice low but sharp. You really did it, huh? Ethan's out. Out. I confirmed, matching her grin. Board voted him gone an hour ago. She let out a low whistle, shaking her head. You're a damn legend. How'd he take it? Like a kicked dog, I said, the memory flashing, his crumpled face, his bitter laugh. Come on, let's talk upstairs. We rode the elevator back up, the air between us crackling with unspoken questions. Rachel had been my rock for years, the one who'd seen through Ethan's charm from day one. She'd warned me about him, back when Henry was still here, and I hadn't listened, not fully. Now, with him gone, I needed her more than ever. Back in my office, I shut the door and gestured to the chair. She sat, leaning forward, elbows on her knees. All right, Harper, she said, eyes locked on mine. Spill it. What's the play? I took a breath, leaning against the desk. I own Horizon now. EKH Ventures. 51%. Ethan's out, I'm in. But it's a mess, Ratch. The team's spooked, the culture shot. I need you to help me fix it. Her brows shot up, then settled, a spark lighting her gaze. You're serious? CEO Emily Harper. Shit. I'd toast you if I had a drink. Later, I said, smirking. Right now, I need your brain. Ethan gutted this place, layoffs, restructures, fear. I want it back to what Henry built. Grit, heart, people first. Rachel nodded, slow and deliberate. I'm in. Been itching to undo his crap since the day he took over. Where do we start? The team, I said, the plan sharpening as I spoke. We meet with them tomorrow, full staff, no bullshit. Lay it out. Ethan's gone, we're rebuilding. Then we dig into the cuts he made, see who we can bring back. Smart, she said, tapping her fingers on her knee. But it's not just bodies. It's trust. He broke it. We've got to earn it back. Exactly. I agreed, feeling the weight shift, less alone, more certain. You handle the people, I'll tackle the board and the numbers. We split the load. She grinned, fierce and familiar. Like old times. Henry'd be proud, you know. There it was again, Henry's ghost, hovering. I swallowed, nodding. I hope so. But this isn't just about him anymore. It's about us, what we make of it. Rachel stood, clapping a hand on my shoulder. Then let's make it good, boss. Boss. The word landed, solid and real. I straightened, the anticipation swelling, a tide pulling me forward. Ethan was gone, but the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning, and this time, I'd do it right. The rain started as I stood in my office, a soft patter against the glass that grew into a steady drumbeat, mirroring the pulse hammering in my temples. Rachel had left 10 minutes ago, her fierce grin still burning in my mind, her promise to rally the team tomorrow ringing like a lifeline. My desk was a mess, papers scattered from the takeover folder, my coffee cup cold and forgotten, the photo of Henry and me staring up through the chaos. I pressed my hands to the glass top, leaning hard, feeling the weight of the day settle into my bones. Horizon was mine. Ethan was gone. So, why did it feel like the floor was about to give way beneath me? The phone buzzed, sharp and insistent, cutting through the rain's rhythm. I snatched it up, glancing at the screen. Lauren Baxter. My stomach twisted, a knot of unease tightening as I swiped to answer. Lauren, I said, keeping my voice steady, though it felt like sandpaper in my throat. What's up? Emily, hi, she chirped, her tone too bright, too polished, like she was reading from a script. I heard about the board meeting. Ethan's out. That's wow. I didn't see that coming. I didn't respond right away, letting the silence stretch, listening to the faint hiss of the line. She hadn't been at the meeting, too junior, too new, but the rumor mill at Horizon was a machine that never slept. I pictured her in her pristine apartment downtown, tablet glowing, probably already drafting her next move. Yeah, I said, finally clipped. He's out. What's on your mind? A pause, then a small laugh, nervous, forced. Well, I was thinking with the restructure off the table now, maybe we could talk about the Q4 campaign. I've got some ideas, big ones. I'd love to run them by you. Big ideas. The words landed like a stone in my gut. I'd spent the morning dismantling Ethan's empire, reclaiming Henry's vision, and here was Lauren, waltzing in with her glossy ambition, oblivious to the wreckage she was stepping over. I straightened, pacing to the window. The city blurred through the rain-streaked glass. Now's not the time, Lauren. We're still picking up the pieces. Oh, I get that, she said quickly, too quickly. But momentum, right? Strike while it's hot? I've been digging into the mid-tier pivot you mentioned. It's solid, but I think we could push harder. Digital first, influencer heavy, really lean into the trends. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. The mid-tier pivot, my pivot, the one I'd fought for last year, the one that had delivered 30% growth, wasn't some trendy experiment. It was strategy, grit, blood in the water. And she wanted to slap influencers on it like a cheap band-aid. Lauren, I said, sharper than I meant to, slow down. You don't even know the full scope yet. I've been studying your files, she shot back, her voice gaining an edge. I'm not just guessing here. I've got data, projections, engagement metrics. I can send them over tonight. The rain pounded harder, a dull roar against the panes, and I felt it, the pressure building, a vice clamping around my chest. I'd just taken Horizon back, wrested it from Ethan's cold hands, and now this kid, this replacement Ethan had shoved in my face, was already trying to rewrite my work. My breath caught, a flare of anger mixing with something darker. Fear, maybe, that I'd misjudged her, that she'd be another Ethan in the making. Send them if you want, I said, forcing calm into my tone, but I'm not greenlighting anything until I've got my team aligned. Tomorrow's about the staff, not your ideas. A beat of silence then. Okay, fair. I want to prove I'm worth keeping around, you know? With Ethan gone, I figured. You figured you'd step up. I cut in, my voice low, hard. I see it, Lauren. Ambition's not the problem. Timing is. You're not running this show, not yet. She didn't reply right away, and I could almost hear her recalculating, the gears turning behind that polished facade. "Got it," she said, finally softer. "I'll wait for your lead. See you tomorrow?" "Yeah," I said, ending the call before she could say more. I dropped the phone onto the desk, the clatter swallowed by the storm outside. My hands shook slightly, not from the cold, but from the surge of everything crashing in at once. Ethan's exit, the board's vote, Rachel's return, and now Lauren, pushing buttons I didn't have the bandwidth to handle. I sank into my chair, the leather creaking, and stared at the ceiling, the shadows shifting as the rain streaked down. The office felt smaller now, the walls pressing in, the air thick with the scent of damp paper and my own fraying nerves. I'd won the battle, but the war was roaring louder than ever. Lauren's call wasn't just a pitch. It was a warning. She wasn't content to sit in my shadow, and if I didn't watch her, she'd carve her own path right through my plans. I thought of Henry, his steady hand guiding me through chaos, and wished for 1 second I could hear his gravelly laugh, his quiet assurance that I'd figure it out. But he was gone, and this was on me. My laptop pinged, an email from Lauren, subject, Q4 proposals. I opened it, scanning the attached slides. Slick, colorful, packed with buzzwords, asterisk disruptive reach, viral potential, micro-influencer ecosystem star. It was everything I hated about Ethan's horizon. Flash over substance, numbers chased for the sake of numbers. My jaw tightened, the anger flaring hotter. She didn't get it, didn't see the soul I was fighting to bring back. I slammed the laptop shut, the sound sharp in the empty room, and stood, pacing again, the storm's rhythm syncing with my steps. I needed to confront her, before it spiraled. Tomorrow's staff meeting was about rebuilding trust, not unveiling her trendy overhaul. But the board, God, the board. They'd back me today, but they were a fickle bunch. Margaret and Jim were solid, but the newer faces Ethan had charmed might latch onto Lauren's shiny pitch if I didn't stake my ground fast. The pressure sank deeper, a cold weight in my chest, and I stopped, gripping the back of my chair, knuckles whitening. The door creaked open, and I spun, half expecting Lauren to barge in, tablet blazing. But it was Rachel, rain dripping from her jacket, her dark eyes narrowed as she took me in. "You look like hell," she said, shutting the door behind her. "Thought you'd be celebrating." "Celebrating's off the table," I muttered, dropping my hands. "Lauren just called. She's already pitching Q4, some digital-first bullshit that'd make Ethan proud." Rachel snorted, crossing her arms. "Kid's got nerve. What did you tell her?" "To wait," I said, sinking back into my chair.
"But she's not waiting, Ratch."
"She's emailing proposals, pushing hard. I can feel it. She's testing me." Rachel dragged the spare chair closer, sitting with a thud. "She's green, Emily. Hungry, but green. You've got the reins, Yank M." "I will," I said, but my voice wavered, betraying the crack beneath my resolve. "It's not just her. It's everything. The board's shaky, the team's a mess, and I've got maybe a day before this victory turns into quicksand." She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, her gaze piercing. "You're not wrong, it's a shitstorm. But you've been through worse. Remember the 18 crash? Henry was losing it, and you held the line. You've got this." I wanted to believe her, but the memory of Henry's panic back then only sharpened the ache. "I held the line because he was there," I said, quieter. "Now it's just me, and I'm not sure I've got enough left." Rachel's jaw tightened, and she reached out, grabbing my wrist, firm but not rough. "Bullshit. You took down Ethan Sullivan today, ripped his throne out from under him. That's not someone running on empty. You're tired, yeah. Scared, maybe. But you're not done." Her words hit like a slap, waking something dormant in me. I met her eyes, saw the fire there, the same fire that had carried us through late nights and lost fights. She was right. I wasn't done. Not yet. I pulled my wrist free, nodding slowly, the storm in my head shifting, hardening into something I could wield. "Okay," I said, voice steadier. "Tomorrow, we hit the staff hard. Truth, no fluff. I'll deal with Lauren after." Shut her down if I have to. Good, Rachel said, leaning back with a smirk. And if she pushes, I'll back you up. Kid won't know what hit her. I managed a faint laugh, the first real one all day, and felt the vice loosen, just a fraction. The rain still hammered outside, relentless, but inside, the air felt lighter, the walls less suffocating. Rachel stood, brushing damp hair from her face. Go home, Emily. Sleep. I'll see you at 8. 8, I echoed, watching her leave, the door clicking shut behind her. Alone again, I turned to the window, the city a smear of light and shadow through the downpour. Lauren's email glowed in my mind, a challenge I'd meet head-on. The board, the team, the future. They were mine to shape, and I'd be damned if I let them slip. I grabbed my coat, the fabric heavy with the day's weight, and headed out, the rain swallowing my footsteps. Tomorrow wasn't just a meeting, it was a battle line. And I'd fight it with everything I had. The rain hadn't let up by the time I stepped into Horizon Innovations the next morning, my coat dripping onto the polished lobby floor as I shook off the night's restless haze. The building hummed with a nervous energy, a low buzz that prickled my skin as I rode the elevator up to the executive floor. My reflection in the steel doors stared back, eyes shadowed, jaw tight. The red tie from yesterday still nodded like a quiet declaration of war. I'd barely slept, the storm outside mirroring the one in my head, but Rachel's words had stuck. You're not done. Today, I'd prove it. The auditorium doors loomed ahead as I stepped off the elevator, twin slabs of glass etched with the company logo, a relic from Henry's era, back when Horizon meant something more than profit margins. Beyond them, I could hear the murmur of voices, the rustle of 100 staffers filing in, their footsteps muffled by the carpeted aisles. My pulse kicked up, a steady thrum beneath my ribs. This wasn't just a meeting, it was the moment I'd either cement my victory or watch it slip through my fingers. Ethan was gone, but his shadow lingered in the fear I'd seen in their eyes, the cuts he'd made, the trust he'd shattered. Today, I'd start clawing it back. I pushed through the doors, the air shifting as I entered. Cooler, heavier, thick with the scent of coffee and damp wool. The auditorium stretched out before me, a cavernous space with tiered seats curving around a low stage. The lights were dim, casting long shadows across the room, but the stage glowed under a single spotlight, a podium waiting like a challenge. Staffers filled the seats, their faces a mix of curiosity and wariness. Marketing grunts I'd fought alongside, tech whizzes who'd weathered Ethan's purges, admins who'd kept the place running through chaos. They turned as I walked down the center aisle, whispers trailing me like a wake. Rachel stood near the stage, arms crossed, her dark eyes scanning the crowd. She caught my gaze and nodded, a sharp tilt of her head that said she had my back. Lauren was there too, off to the side, her blonde ponytail catching the light as she tapped at her tablet. Her posture was too straight, too eager, and I felt that knot in my stomach tighten again. She hadn't backed off, not after last night's call, not after her email. I'd deal with her later. Right now, the room was mine. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage, my heels clicking against the wood, each sound a hammer strike in the quiet. The podium felt cold under my hands as I gripped it, the mic humming faintly as I leaned in. A sea of eyes stared back, some familiar, some new, all waiting for me to speak. My throat tightened, a flicker of doubt clawing up my spine.
What if they didn't buy it?
What if they saw through the steel I'd forged and found the cracks beneath? I shoved it down, deep, and took a breath, letting the air steady me. Good morning, I said, my voice cutting through the room, firm and louder than I'd expected. It echoed off the walls, settling the murmurs into a tense hush. I know you've heard the rumors by now. Let's make it clear. Ethan Sullivan is no longer CEO of Horizon Innovations. As of yesterday, he's out. I'm in. A ripple ran through the crowd. Gasps, a few sharp nods, a chair creaking as someone shifted. I scanned their faces, catching flickers of relief in the old guard, uncertainty in the newer hires. My hands tightened on the podium, the wood biting into my palms. I'm not here to sugarcoat it, I went on. Ethan's tenure was a wrecking ball, layoffs, restructures, fear. You felt it. I felt it. He gutted what this company was built on, what Henry Sullivan stood for. But that ends now. Henry's name hung in the air, heavy, a tether to the past I could feel in my bones. I saw a few heads tilt, eyes sharpening. Jim from IT, who'd been here since the early days, gave a slow nod. Sarah from Creative, who'd cried in my office after her team got slashed, sat straighter. They remembered. I pressed on, the words spilling out, raw and unscripted. I've spent 8 years here, fighting for this place. You know me. You know I don't quit. Yesterday, I took Horizon back, bought it out from under Ethan through EKH Ventures. 51%. My call. And I'm telling you this, we're not just surviving anymore. We're rebuilding. The room shifted, a collective breath held and released. I could feel the weight of their attention, the fragile thread of trust one was tugging at. My chest burned, a mix of determination and something fiercer, pride, maybe, or the ghost of Henry's faith in me. I leaned closer to the mic, voice dropping, deliberate. That starts with you. No more cuts. No more looking over your shoulder. We're bringing back who we can, people Ethan axed, people who belong here. Rachel Torres is heading that up, starting today. If you've got names, get them to her. Rachel raised a hand from the sidelines, her smirk cutting through the tension, and a few scattered claps broke out, tentative, but there. I caught Lauren's eye then, her lips pressed into a thin line, her tablet still glowing in her lap. She didn't clap. She didn't move. That knot in my gut twisted harder, but I pushed it aside. Not yet. We've got work ahead, I said, straightening, my gaze sweeping the room. Ethan left us bruised, but he didn't break us. I'm not here to chase his numbers or his boardroom games. I'm here for what Henry built, grit, heart, a place where we fight for each other. That's Horizon. That's us. The words landed, heavy and final, and for a moment, the room was still. Too still, like the air before a storm breaks. Then Jim stood, clapping slow and steady, his grizzled face creased with something like respect. Sarah followed, then a handful of others, the sound swelling into a wave that crashed over me. Not everyone joined. Some sat stiff, arms crossed, doubt etched in their lines. But it was enough. A start. I stepped back from the podium, exhaling hard, the spotlight hot on my skin. Rachel climbed the steps, clapping my shoulder as she leaned in. Nailed it, she muttered, voice low. They're with you most of it. Most to start, I said, my eyes drifting to Lauren again. She was standing now, slipping toward the exit, her tablet tucked under her arm. My jaw tightened. Keep them moving, wretch. I've got something to handle. She followed my gaze, her smirk fading. Her?
Now.
Now, I said, stepping off the stage, the applause fading behind me as I moved. The auditorium doors swung shut, muffling the noise, and I caught Lauren in the hall, her heels clicking fast toward the elevators. Lauren, I called, sharp enough to stop her cold. She turned, her ponytail swinging, her face a mask of practiced calm. Emily, she said, tilting her head. Great speech. Really inspiring. Don't, I snapped, closing the distance between us. The hall was empty, the air stale with the hum of overhead lights, but it felt like a courtroom. Me on one side, her on the other, the tension thick enough to choke on. I told you last night. Timing matters. You're still pushing. Her mask slipped, just a flicker, her eyes narrowing. I'm not pushing. I'm contributing. You're in charge now, great. But the Q4 campaign's live, and I've got ideas that could. Ideas. I cut in, voice low, hard. Digital first, influencers, trends, your email, right? I read it. It's Ethan's playbook, Lauren. Flashy, hollow. That's not where we're going. She flinched, barely, but I saw it. A crack in her polish. It's not hollow, she said, stepping closer, her voice tightening. It's smart. Data-driven. You want growth? This is how you get it. Growth, I echoed, a bitter laugh slipping out. I got 30% last year without your viral bullshit. You think you're the only one with data? I built this department, bled for it. You don't get to waltz in and repaint it because Ethan handed you my job. Her jaw tightened, her fingers whitening around her tablet. Ethan's gone. I'm not him. I'm trying to help Emily, to prove I'm not just some kid he dumped on you. Then prove it by listening. I shot back, my voice rising despite myself. I'm not your stepping stone. This company's a wreck. I'm fixing it, not chasing your buzzwords. You want in? Fall in line. The words hung between us, sharp and jagged, and for a second, I thought she'd snap. Push back harder, dig in her heels. But she didn't. Her shoulders dropped, just a fraction, and she nodded, slow, her eyes locked on mine. Okay, she said, quieter. Your call. What do you need from me? I studied her, the fire in my chest cooling, replaced by a wary calm. Was she backing down, or playing a longer game? I couldn't tell, not yet. Stay with Rachel today, I said finally. Help her with the team. No pitches, no proposals. Just listen. Got it, she said, her tone clipped but steady. She turned, heading for the elevator, and I watched her go, the click of her heels fading into the hum of the building. My hands unclenched, the tension draining slow, leaving a hollow ache behind. Back in the auditorium, the crowd was thinning, Rachel's voice carrying as she corralled a knot of staffers near the stage. I leaned against the wall, the cool plaster grounding me, and let my eyes drift to the logo etched on the glass doors. Henry's mark, faded but still there. The fight with Lauren wasn't over, I knew that. She'd bend for now, but ambition like hers didn't stay quiet. And the board, they'd be watching, waiting for my next move. The rain drummed on outside, relentless, but inside, I felt it, a spark, small but fierce, igniting in the wreckage Ethan had left. This was the peak, the crest of the wave I'd been riding since that humid Tuesday in his office. I'd taken Horizon back, faced Lauren down, and now the real work began. Henry's values, grit, heart, weren't just words anymore. They were mine to restore. The air in my office felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the weight of Ethan's shadow had finally lifted. It was late afternoon, weeks after that tense staff meeting, and the rain that had battered Austin for days had given way to a crisp, golden sunlight spilling through the blinds. I stood by the window, hands in my pockets, watching the city hum below, cars weaving through downtown, the skyline sharp against a sky that seemed to promise something new. The glass was cool against my shoulder as I leaned into it, my reflection faint but steady, a woman I was starting to recognize again. Behind me, my desk was a battlefield of its own, spreadsheets tracking rehires, notes from Rachel scrawled in her jagged handwriting, a half-empty coffee mug ringed with stains. The photo of Henry and me still sat there, a quiet sentinel amid the chaos, his grin a reminder of why I'd fought so hard. These past weeks had been a blur of late nights and hard choices, rebuilding Horizon piece by piece with Rachel at my side. We'd brought back half the staff Ethan had cut. Good people, loyal people, their gratitude a fuel I hadn't expected. The halls buzzed again, not with fear, but with purpose. It wasn't perfect, wasn't finished, but it was ours. The door creaked open, and I turned to see Rachel stride in, her black blazer swapped for a faded denim jacket, a stack of folders under her arm. She dropped them on my desk with a thud, brushing her hands like she'd just unloaded a burden she was glad to be rid of. Latest head count, she said, her voice rough but warm. We're at 80% capacity, more than I thought we'd pull off this fast. I crossed to the desk, flipping open the top folder. Names stared back at me, Jim from IT, Sarah from Creative, others I'd mourned losing under Ethan's axe. 80%, I murmured, a slow smile tugging at my lips. That's not just numbers, Ratch. That's a pulse. She snorted, leaning against the edge of the desk, arms crossed. Yeah, well, don't get too misty-eyed. We've still got gaps, tech's thin, and Lauren's been sniffing around again, itching to pitch her influencer crap. Lauren. The name prickled, a thorn I hadn't fully pulled out. She'd stayed in line since our showdown in the hall, mostly. She'd thrown herself into helping Rachel with the team, her ambition dialed back but not gone, simmering beneath her crisp smiles and clipped nods. I'd kept her close, watching, waiting for the moment she'd push again. Let her itch, I said, shutting the folder. She'll get her shot when I say so, not before. Rachel's eyes narrowed, a glint of amusement there. You're enjoying this boss thing a little too much, Harper. Maybe, I shot back, matching her grin. Or maybe I'm just done letting people run over me. She laughed, a sharp bark that bounced off the walls, and for a second, the room felt alive. Warm, solid, a space I'd reclaimed. I sank into my chair, the leather creaking under me, and let my gaze drift to the window again. The sunlight caught the edges of the awards on my walls, glinting off the metal like tiny beacons. This wasn't Ethan's horizon anymore, cold and hollow. It wasn't even Henry's, not exactly. It was mine, forged in the fire of the past months, tempered by every fight I'd won and lost. Speaking of, Rachel said, her tone shifting, softer now. This came for you. She pulled a cream envelope from her stack, the paper worn at the edges, and slid it across the desk. My name was scrawled on the front in a shaky, familiar hand, *Emily Harper*, and my breath caught, a sudden tightness gripping my chest. Who's it from? I asked, though part of me already knew, the weight of it sinking in before I touched it. Henry's widow, Rachel said, watching me close. Dropped off this morning. Said she found it in his things, meant for you. I stared at the envelope, my fingers hovering over it, afraid to break whatever spell it held. Henry's widow, Clara, had faded from my life after he left Horizon, her calls growing sparse as his health failed. I'd sent flowers when he passed, a year after Ethan's coup, but the guilt of not doing more still gnawed at me. Now this, his handwriting, reaching across time. I swallowed, picking it up, the paper rough against my skin. You want me to stay? Rachel asked, her voice low, giving me an out. No, I said, shaking my head. I've got this. Go home, Ratch. You've earned it. She nodded, pushing off the desk, and paused at the door. Call if you need me, yeah? Always, I replied, echoing her words from weeks ago. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me alone with the letter and the hum of the building settling into dusk. I turned the envelope over, my thumb brushing the seal, a wax, cracked but intact, stamped with an H. My hands trembled as I broke it, sliding out a single sheet folded in half. The ink was faded, the lines uneven, but it was Henry's voice staring back at me, clear as if he'd spoken it aloud. Emily, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I hope you're still fighting. You always had that spark, steel I called it, and I wasn't wrong. Horizon was my heart, but it's yours now, in a way I never got to see. Ethan's shadow's long, I know. He's my blood, and I loved him, but he lost his way. If he's hurt you, hurt what we built. Don't let it stand.
Take it back.
Make it yours. You've got the guts for it, kid. Always did. I'm proud of you. Don't forget that. Henry, the words blurred as my eyes stung, a hot ache swelling in my throat. I pressed the letter flat on the desk, my fingers tracing the loops of his signature, shaky but sure. He'd written this before the end, before Ethan's betrayal, before my takeover, before everything, and yet it fit, like he'd seen it coming. I leaned back, exhaling hard, the sunlight fading into a soft amber glow that bathed the room in warmth. Proud of me. The weight of that sank deep, loosening something I'd held tight for too long. I stood, crossing to the window again, the letter still in my hand. The city sprawled below, lights flickering on as night crept in, and I felt it, a quiet release, a tide of calm washing over the anger I'd carried since that humid Tuesday in Ethan's office. Henry hadn't just given me Horizon, he'd given me permission to fight for it my way, flaws and all. The revenge I'd chased, the bitterness that had fueled me, it was still there, but softer now, overshadowed by something bigger.
Pride. Purpose.
The door swung open a year later, almost to the day, and I stepped into the auditorium again, the same glass doors etched with Henry's logo greeting me like an old friend. The room was packed, standing room only, the air electric with chatter and the clink of glasses. A banner stretched across the stage, Horizon Innovations, 1 year strong. My heels clicked as I climbed the steps, the spotlight hot on my skin. But this time, there was no doubt clawing up my spine, just a steady hum of certainty. The crowd hushed as I reached the podium, a sea of faces staring up, Rachel near the front, grinning fierce, Jim and Sarah, their teams behind them. Even Lauren, her tablet swapped for a notebook, her posture less rigid, her eyes sharp but not defiant. The past year had been a grind, rehiring, restructuring, clawing back trust, but the numbers didn't lie. Growth was up, not Ethan's cold efficiency, but real, rooted in the grit Henry had taught me. The culture wasn't perfect, but it was alive, breathing, ours. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady, carrying over the room. "A year ago, we stood here bruised but not broken. Ethan Sullivan was out, and I promised you we'd rebuild. Tonight, I'm here to say we did." Applause broke out, sharp and sudden, and I let it roll over me, a wave I didn't fight. 35% growth, I went on, nodding to the screen behind me, where charts glowed. Not just numbers, jobs, lives, a company that fights for its own. We brought back 62 people Ethan cut. We doubled down on mid-tier markets, not trends, not flash, strategy you built with me. The clapping swelled, and I saw Rachel elbow Jim, her smirk wide. Lauren nodded, slow, a flicker of respect in her gaze I hadn't seen before. She'd stayed, learned, bent just enough to fit. Not a friend, not yet, but not a threat either. "This isn't my win," I said, my voice dropping, softer but firm. "It's ours. Henry Sullivan's dream, grit, heart, people first, isn't dead. It's here in you. And we're just getting started." The room erupted, cheers bouncing off the walls, and I stepped back, the spotlight blurring as my eyes caught the logo again. Henry's mark, ours now. My chest swelled, not with revenge, but with something fuller, fulfillment, maybe, or the start of it. I thought of his letter, tucked in my desk drawer, and felt his pride echo in the noise around me. Later, back in my office, I stood alone, the city lights painting the walls in streaks of gold and shadow. The banner from the stage hung behind my desk now, a quiet trophy. I sank into my chair, the leather familiar under me, and pulled Henry's letter from the drawer, unfolding it one more time. "Make it yours," I had. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but mine all the same. The phone buzzed, Rachel probably, dragging me to drinks with the team, but I let it sit, just for a moment. The night stretched ahead, alive with possibility, and I leaned back, Henry's words in my hand, the future wide open. This was the end of one fight, the start of another. And I was ready.